Good evening, everyone. My name's Dale Parrish. I'm the state director for Convention Estates here in Indiana. So glad to have you with us tonight. Got a really great show lined up for you this evening. And so I just want to, once again, I want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. And let me bring up my co-host, Mr. Ken Kuchuba. I caught him getting a drink there. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Dale. Yeah, wetting the whistle,
All right. Well,
it is allergy season, so you got to keep the throat wetting down there.
No kidding. I'll tell you, I'll apologize right off the bat here that I've been fighting a cold for over a week now, and I think I'm just about over it, but I've been there before. You think you got it whipped, and all of a sudden you wake up one morning and realize no, you don't.
Keeps coming back, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, Ken will be with us this evening, and one of Ken's roles this evening is to monitor our viewer comments and questions. So if you're viewing our broadcast this evening, feel free to enter a comment or a question, and we'll do our best to address those during the broadcast. So that's what it's for. And Ken will be monitoring those, and will when he comes across a good one, he'll let me know, and we'll interrupt and bring it up and take a look at it. All right, Ken. Hopefully we'll get some good comments tonight.
Sounds good.
We got a great topic tonight. We got a great guest. I'll be introducing her very shortly, but it's Debbie Stewart again, and Debbie's going to be talking about the Constitution tonight. So she's going to make us all feel a little kind of dumb, I think. She always brings up things that we're not aware of, or that we haven't we have forgotten over the course of time. So it's always good to have Debbie on. Of course, I don't want to make her feel like she's too important, Ken. We got to keep her under control here. But anyway, Ken, let's look at the numbers here. Tonight's broadcast is number 192.
Creeping up on it. Yep.
Yeah, and you've been with me for 58 of those. We're getting very, very close to that 200 mark, Ken. And I think, Ken and I have learned, I certainly have, and I think Ken has too, that this is a continuous effort endeavor. That we doing a live stream like this. Wouldn't you agree, Ken? It's just
takes preparation and planning, and stick to it. Stick-to-itiveness. I think that's a word.
Stick-to-itiveness, yes.
If not, I just made it up. So,
well, and Ken and I were just going over some of the analytics on our broadcast the other night, and and we obviously would like to have more people viewing, have more views, and it's just a continuous effort. You got to be willing to make changes and willing to try something different here, try something different there, whatever. It's just it's a continuous learning process. I don't know how else to say it, Ken.
Well, and we continue, and we constantly are welcome viewer comments and viewer wishes as to what they'd like to see brought out on the program. So, get those comments and suggestions in. We're open to basically put on a program that serves what the viewer is looking to consume. So that's all part of it.
Yeah. Well, I just got a comment. You haven't seen this, Ken, but I just got a comment. It says, "Make Debbie Stewart the permanent host." Did you see that one?
I missed that one. I missed that one.
She submitted that comment. Never mind.
Well, it's one of those things that just if that does the trick and she builds the viewership to 12K, then we're all for it.
We're all for it. That's right. That's right.
If that happens, Dale, she could quit her teaching job and get paid on YouTube.
Oh, hey, yeah.
I think Debbie likes that. She's giving some thumbs up to that. I think.
I can see. Yeah. I can see her kind of going bananas in the waiting room there.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and throw up a comment that just came in, which we could instill this into the Monday Night Live programs. Susan suggests a ladies' night.
A ladies' night, huh? All right.
Well, there you go. First comment, first suggestion. We're open to those type of things.
That's an
Maybe
idea.
we should have Susan Lyon and Sue Gervais and Debbie Stewart all have a Monday Night Live program. Sunday Night Live with the ladies.
That might something. Hey, like I said, we got to be willing to make changes and embrace new ideas. So, okay.
There you go.
All right, good. Excellent. All right, let's move on then. Just want to mention once again now our national website, conventionofstates.com. That's where if you want to get involved in Convention of States, and we hope you do want to do that. If you're not already involved, go to conventionofstates.com and sign up and become a supporter, and hopefully get involved in whatever way fits your needs as an activist. Also want to mention our next roundtable, which on the fourth Monday of every night, we changed the format and changed it to a panel discussion format. So our next roundtable will be on April 24th. Which will be the fourth Monday in April. So I also want to once again mention that we are also doing podcasts now, COS Indiana Live podcasts, and we do two of them. The roundtable format that we do every fourth Monday that I just mentioned, we take the audio portion of that roundtable, and then we offer that up as a podcast. Have we? We just had a roundtable on March 27th. Have we?
Yes, we did. It's not quite published yet, but it's in the editing mode. We should have that out soon. Yep. All
right, good. And the other podcast that we do it's called COS Indiana Live Voices, and this is where we feature one of our dynamic volunteers here in Indiana for Convention of States. And we take about an hour and we talk about that individual, and we learn much more about that individual than what we thought we knew about him or her. And it's proven to be very interesting, I will have to say. And who is our next guest in line for this, Ken?
Well, I think it's somebody that probably needs to start digging into his past and hiding some of these things that you want to dig into. I think it's me.
It's you. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
We got I know we've both been busy and sick and everything. We gotta get down and determine a date to get this done.
Got to find a
So
date when your voice is working, right?
yeah,
Because you're going to do
well,
this by yourself. So you said, so you really
that,
can't, you got to have a voice.
that's right. I won't have a co-host uh, for that one. So
Yeah. Yeah.
well, we'll get her done. We'll get her done.
We
So
will. We
yes,
will.
the next one. Now, those podcasts can be primarily found on Spotify.com. That's
Mm-hmm.
the place where you can find those. And I believe we're showing up on some other platforms, right, Ken?
Right. Right. Google Podcasts and Stitcher. And
Okay.
those are two other places you can search. So there's a number of them out there. I think also that if you do a search with the exact name, should come up with it. But yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly Spotify.com.
Spotify's actually took over Anchor, so they're the main driver there. So yeah, Spotify's the easiest way to do it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what we're going to be doing tonight on the broadcast. You know, last year we decided that we wanted to, as a theme, we wanted to focus on what activism can I take in convention of states, and thinking that we would go with that theme for a few months and then we would change to another theme. Well, we're still doing it. We still have that theme, and it has turned out to be a very good ongoing theme for us to utilize. What activism can I take in convention of states? And I think that's it. The theme is working well for us, and we'll be talking about it more and more as we go along. Now, in our guest segment this evening, as I mentioned, we've got our regular coming on, Debbie Stewart. And, you know, Debbie has, her specialty has been the Constitution and constitutional literacy. She's also done various civics lessons. These are courses and topics that she teaches. So we're able to utilize her background in that area. So tonight, she's going to talk about breaking down the Constitution. And this is just kind of an overall, I think, view of the Constitution, the components, just to remind us of what's involved in the Constitution. There'll be some areas that we'll dig in a little bit. And once Debbie is finished, then Ken, you're going to do a segment called "Raise Your Voice." You want to talk about that? You want
to raise your voice again tonight? Yeah, and we always encourage people to pay attention to our guests, because a lot of times things or questions are used that directly related to the topics at hand. So that's a little hint I'll throw in tonight. But
okay,
yeah, we'll get that QR code up tonight so that people can get their smartphones out and get ready to participate in that. We always look for people that love to get involved in a quiz and jump right in and have some fun with us. So that should be showing up here just about now. And you should be seeing the slido.com with its number for tonight. The night's questions area. It's number 9380405. That's if you're on your tablet or laptop or desktop. And of course, got your smartphone and handy at hand. Just snap that QR code, and that'll get you ready for tonight's segment. So, and the QR code and that address will also show when we start. So, grab the phone and get ready, and we'll have some fun with that tonight. I think it ought to be some good educational type questions.
And the hint is to pay close attention to what Debbie Stewart's going to present us tonight, right?
I think that'll help people. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Just want to, I just want to help our viewers out as much as possible here. So
a little bit, yeah. We'd like to get as many people participating as possible. So if you're paying attention, you can do that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, we're going to have to face the music now and bring Debbie on. And she's we've said some things about her that I hope are okay with her. So
We have to give her a rebuttal time, I think.
I guess we should do that, shouldn't we? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Hello, Debbie.
Hey, Debbie. Hello. It is the American way, Debbie. So go ahead, fire away.
I have nothing to say. I am
Wow.
glad to be here.
Good to hear.
I know there are things you couldn't hear and while you were in the waiting room, but I just want you to know that things that Ken said, I stood up for you. I had your back, and I was fully supportive of you.
You are my defender, Dale.
Just so you know.
Yeah, that's why they call him the state director. He directs. He directs the conversation the way it's supposed to go, right?
All right. Well, Debbie, you're talking about breaking down the Constitution this evening. So you want to start out with a bit of an overview and get started on?
Yeah, sure. So take you back to 1787, and in Philadelphia, they called a constitutional convention. And it started on about May 25th of 1787 and went approximately 100 days, all the way till September 17th of 1787. There were people coming and going, but total there were 55 delegates that showed up to work on this. James Madison actually came 3 months early to get started on kind of what he could put together. And they, by the time September 7th, 1787 got there, these 55 men had come and gone. The youngest was 29. The oldest was 84. Ben Franklin was the oldest one. And George Washington presided over it. But on September 17th of 1787, which we call Constitution Day now, 39 men signed the document. And so then it had to go back to the states for ratification, all 13 colonies. And by the way, there was one of the 13 colonies that did not show up, and it was Rhode Island. So they didn't feel like they needed to be there. They didn't agree what was going on, so they didn't send anybody. So they eventually signed it after everybody else did. It was already working and it activated when they finally jumped on board. So
is that why we left them way up there in the corner?
I think that's it.
Made them stay up there next to the ocean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. They got their own little place up there. So
yeah, is that right? Yeah.
So, but anyways, that's just a real quick blip there about how it happened and how many people were there. And very interestingly, when I ask people, what do you think is the colony or the state that had the most signers? And most people say what?
You asking us?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd probably be thinking Delaware.
I'm going to say Virginia.
Okay. And Ken?
Delaware?
Well, you know what? I get Delaware, not so much, but Virginia, because they were very involved in the Virginia Assembly, and a lot of those people were involved in the federal Constitution. But actually, Pennsylvania had the most signers. So,
really?
Yeah, there you go.
See, folks, what I told you, how she comes on and she's going to expose how little Ken and I know about this topic. Okay.
Well, another interesting fact real quick before I just talk about the 4 sections of the Constitution is the U.S. Constitution is the oldest Constitution and the shortest written Constitution ever with major countries in the world. It has 4,543 words, which was before the amendments were added later. So if you add the amendments, and of course the signatures were already there, you get 7,591 words. It's still the shortest and the oldest. And we talked earlier this year, the average age of a constitution is only 17 years.
Yeah,
for countries around the world. So we
amazing.
are leading the pack with our Constitution. So
yeah.
Okay, so overview. There's 4 main sections of our Constitution. There's a preamble, which is kind of an introduction. I'll get into that in a second. There are an article section. There is the section for the signatures, and then the amendments come after that. So it's kind of 4 main sections that contains that the Constitution contains. So let's get into the first one, which is the preamble. And that's really the kind of the introduction and or what are the goals? What is the purpose of this Constitution? They summed it up in just a small paragraph. We the people of the United States. They list 6 things here in order to, 1, form a more perfect union, 2, establish justice, 3, to ensure domestic tranquility, 4, provide for the common defense, 5, promote the general welfare. And that word welfare does not mean like what we call welfare now. It was the welfare of the people, that everybody was doing okay, you know. And then the last one was to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, or our children and grandchildren. And we, the people, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. I love how it was short, succinct, right to the point.
Yep. Yep.
So that's our beautiful preamble. And this is a great thing to memorize. This is a great little thing in high school, or when you're taking a government class, just to kind of keep in mind what were the goals of the Constitution. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
So let's move to the articles. There are how many articles? 7. There are 7 articles to the Constitution. Okay. So let's just kind of touch base what they are. There we have the again, the preamble is the purpose. We just went over that. We have Article 1 is the longest article by far, and it's the legislative branch. And I'll talk about a few details for these in just a second. Article 2 is the executive branch. That's the president. So the legislative branch is Congress. It's the House of Representatives and the Senate. The executive branch is the president and his or her cabinet. The judicial branch is our whole judicial system. Article 4 covers relations among the states and with the national government. Article 5, which is what Convention of States is all about, is about amending the Constitution. Article 6 is about national debts, the supremacy clause, and oaths of office. And last was, how do we ratify the Constitution, is Article 7. So if you would look at the Constitution, it's actually broken down. So let's take Article 1, for example. Each one of these articles has sections in there. For example, Article 1 would be, the Section 1 would be 1.1, Section 2 would be 1.2, Section 3 would be 1.3. And it keeps going. All the way, there are 10 actual sections of Article 1 breaking down the legislative branch. But interestingly, within each of those sections, there's even smaller sections called clauses. So for example, in the legislative branch, Section 1.1 is all lawmaking power in Congress. But then there's a clause 1.1, all lawmaking power is in 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So each one of those sections gets broken down into clauses, and the largest section of Article 1, the legislative branch, talks about powers granted to Congress. And I really love to talk about this because you would think they have 102 powers, but they only have 18 powers listed in the Constitution. And the way our Constitution is written is that these 18 powers, Congress is allowed to, our federal U.S. Congress is allowed to do, but anything else outside of that is supposed to be for the states. So the original intent was, hey, we've got all these state governments going on, but we're going to have this small federal government that just is involved in things where the states need to talk to each other, you know, coins, declaring war, things that are more of a national issue that somebody needed to preside over. But besides that, that's it. This little section of 18 powers. And so some of them are, for example, to raise and support a navy, to call the militia, to execute laws, establish rules of naturalization and bankruptcies. But what's happened is we're way outside these 18 powers that Congress was originally given. So,
well, and I think you know, many of the critics point to the Supreme Court and how they've interpreted these, and some of the rulings and decisions that they've made over the years has really expanded these powers beyond what they intended to be.
yes, I agree. And I labeled the title of this Breaking Down the Constitution because we're breaking it down by talking about the sections, but I feel like there's a double meaning. Our Constitution really is kind of broken down in the fact that we're not applying what's actually in there, and we're not honoring what's in there. Now, I don't think the Constitution itself is breaking down, but I think the people that are using the Constitution, those who have taken an oath to obey it, right, and to honor it, are not necessarily doing that. And so it's getting skewed. So anyways, going back to Article 1, that's the legislative branch, tells you all about the House of Representatives and the Senate and how that works, and all the lawmaking, because remember, Congress is the branch that makes the laws. Okay, then we move on to the second branch, which is the executive branch, and that is the president and his cabinet. And this is a much smaller section. It's about the duties, powers, restraints, and elections having to do with the executive branch. It only has 4 sections to it. So, and it basically talks about the office of the president, the powers of the president, responsibilities of the president, and how a president is impeached. That's it. So a little bit shorter and to the point. And then we move to Article 3. And remember, the executive branch executes the laws that the legislative branch makes. Okay. Article 3 is the judicial branch. It talks about the powers, the jurisdiction, the restraint, and what treason is considered. And there's only 3 sections there about the Supreme Court, the jurisdiction of courts, and what treason defined is and what the punishment is. So even smaller. So legislative branch is the largest, and then the executive branch gets smaller, and then the judicial branch gets even smaller. And by the time we move to Article 4, which is relations of the states, it's basically just a couple paragraphs long. And there's only 4 sections to that talks about full faith and credit, citizens' rights and fugitives, new states and territories, and what are the protections of the states. Okay, because we needed an amendment that talked about how are the states going to operate, because we really are 50 independent states, but we're under one large, United States of America. So there had to be some discussion about that. Okay, Article 5 is the amendment process, and you guys know that really well. I think it's interesting that they had the amendment. The way this was written in Article 5 was that the Congress could bring up an amendment if 2/3 approved of it or proposed it, and then they went back and 3/4 of it ratified. It was it. But there was a very smart man named George Mason, and he said, "Wait a second. So you're telling me the only way that we can get an amendment proposed and ratified is running it through Congress?" He's like, something's wrong, because if we have tyranny, or if we have a government that wants to be too powerful, he saw the issue with that. And we're thankful for that. So he developed the second way, which is to call it Convention of States, which is what we're all about.
That's right.
So love that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
What foresight?
Yeah. And then Article 6 talks about debts of confederation, the supremacy clause, and duties of officials. And this is really, that supremacy clause is really where we're at when we're talking about signing a treaty, an overseas treaty. That becomes the law of the land. It supersedes what our Constitution says. So that's why we have to be careful if we're going to sign a treaty like the World Health Organization, this pandemic treaty, because then they actually have a right to come over here and run things the way they want to. And there's a lot being talked about right now about some of these treaties that are being proposed. So we have to be careful that we're paying attention to that. Oh, actually, Article 6 also talks about that there's no religious test for a president. So that's where that fits in. And then Article 7 rounds it up with a very small section, a paragraph on how to ratify the Constitution. So those are 7 articles. And then, so then it was signed, the signers, on September 17th. And then it went back and got ratified by the states. New Hampshire was the 9th state. They needed 9 to ratify it. And not too much longer after that, it actually went into activation. And but there were people who didn't sign it, and some states that said they wouldn't ratify it until they put a Bill of Rights in there, or what were the individual citizens' right, because they were anti-federalists, and they believed that, hey, we don't want to give the federal government too much power, because, and so some people said, well, it's already in the Constitution, all the individual rights. But there were some people that said, no way. We're not signing this thing unless you promise you're going to put in a number of amendments that says what our rights should be. And so James Madison agreed to do that. And he did do that a little bit later. And he got those amendments in there. and they got the original 10 amendments were called the Bill of Rights, but actually 12 of them were proposed, and they ended up only accepting and ratifying 10 of them. And then later, as you can see from the chart up here, 11 through 27, by the way, we have 27 amendments now. And if you look, the 27th Amendment was the last one passed, and that was in 1992. And that was the amendment on congressional pay, meaning that they can't decide, well, I'm serving a 6-year term as a senator, so I'm gonna vote to increase my pay this term. No, you have to, if you're gonna do that, it doesn't start till the next term. Okay, but those are amendments 11 through 27. And those are the ones that we've added. Very interesting point here. I was just reading about, okay, here we go. Since the inception of the Constitution, the House of Reps has introduced over 11,000 amendments, but only 33 have been sent to the states and only 27 have been ratified. 11,000. That's a lot.
I've heard those numbers before. That's amazing, isn't it? That's,
yeah. Yeah.
Over 11,000 proposed amendments.
Right.
Wow.
So, I mean, and it's good to know that they take the amendment process very seriously. We don't just want to be, amending and then repealing and amending. And we only have one amendment that was ever repealed, and that was prohibition, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
18th Amendment was repealed by the 21st. So those are all of our amendments that we have. And as we need to know what those are as citizens of America, especially 1 through 10, but many of them, suffrage, women's right to vote, but, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, those ones that were right at the beginning, probably because they were the most important. A lot of people don't realize that the government is chipping away at those right now. So we need to be on guard with that. So that basically is how the Constitution's broken down, a little bit background on that. And then, but I think an interesting just kind of side note and maybe last point to talk about are what are some modern day deviations that we see happening? Because the Constitution, we are a constitutional republic, and the way that you run a constitutional republic is by the Constitution.
Well, that's a good point, Debbie, and that brings up a couple of at least a question and a comment that I think relate to our branches. So I'll bring up a question that I think a lot of people wonder about here from John Graves, who asks, so where does the executive order come in? Is it possible that there is no provision for the president to write executive orders?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because it's kind of like one of those side privileges that a president has that was used very little in the earlier years. But then in the second half of the presidents we have, it's been very abused. And not only executive orders, but now there's executive agreements too. And that's one of the deviations. It used to be that the legislative branch was the only one who makes a law. But now every time a president comes in, if they're the opposite party, they wipe out all the EOs from the previous president, and then they bring theirs in. And Obama, Trump, I don't remember about Bush, but like several hundred executive orders. And typically they do a lot of them in their first week of office. They're just repealing right. And getting rid of the old and putting their new one. Like, executive order can be almost anything, and it is being abused. And on both sides of the aisle. But there is a provision that it's kind of like an unspoken, that's a great question, because it's kind of like an unspoken thing that they can do, but it's not supposed to be treated like law, but we are treating it with like law most of the time.
It was my understanding, I read somewhere, where an executive order is supposed to relate to the president administering the executive branch, and it's supposed to be directed toward the administration of the executive branch. It's turned into making laws. Is what it's turned into.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intended to be that. It wasn't intended to be that.
Yes, and it's true that although the Constitution does not specifically allow for official presidential orders, presidents have issued them from the very beginning. as part of their responsibility to maintain and defend the Constitution. That's the original reason. But like you said, we've gotten way off track with that.
Yeah.
And then somebody gets off track and it works, and then they call that a precedent. Well, 5 presidents ago he did this, and it's like our judicial branch. So much more we're going off of precedent versus original law.
Yeah.
So that's where we get ourselves in trouble. Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued more than 3,500 of them.
Really?
Our last few presidents have been in like around the 2 to 300s. It gives you an idea of what FDR.
Yeah, of course, FDR. There was during a war, but anyway.
Well, that brings up go ahead, Dale. Go.
Well, one of the deviations that kind of a deviation. We talked about this before we came on tonight. I'm still confused as to whether Mike Pence, as vice president after the 2020 election, if in fact constitutionally he had the right to not certify the election, or to postpone certifying the election subject to some investigation or whatever, because of evidence that had been surfaced about the election. Of course, he claims, if I understand this right, he claims that his constitutional advice was that he did not have the authority to do that. But I've heard other constitutional experts say that, yes, the Constitution does give him the authority to do that. Do you know, Debbie, or would any of our viewers maybe have any information on that?
Yeah, I would love to hear from some of the viewers. That's not something that I have dove into down to the fine detail, but I do know that shortly after all that happened, when there were certain people who said that he didn't have the right to do it, they were putting together a bill to say that they're not going to let the vice president decertify elections anymore. So if it wasn't something that was constitutional, why would you come up with a law that says that you can't do that?
Right.
So I'm kind of confused with that. They said this on one hand, but then on the other hand, they needed to come up with something that would forbid that in the future. And I'm like, well, so I don't know, and maybe somebody does.
One of the constitutional experts that I've depended upon for advice and for education on has been Mark Levin for a long time. And correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but I believe Mark Levin's position on this was that Pence did have the authority to delay that certification, or whatever the process is called. That the Constitution did give him the leeway to do something like that. But obviously, the vice president didn't. The advice he was given was the opposite. So,
well, we have a comment on that, so I'll go ahead and throw that up. Being that we're talking about that right now, and David Nally says, I think he could have done it, and then they would have had to challenge it.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
And then we have a follow-up question too, going back to the executive orders. Debbie, just wanted to kind of clarify this for John. He said he feels unprepared here, but is the executive order actually written into the Constitution?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think there's anything in there on that. I mean, I can double check, but there's nothing constitutionally. It's just been a privilege that they've kind of had since the beginning of, the presidency, where they could do that. Like if they couldn't wait for Congress to go through both houses and get approved, and how they do that, and they debate bills and stuff like that, they would hurry up and do something like that. But we've turned it into way more. So I don't think it's in the Constitution.
Well, I have one other comment, that not to get us off to another subject, but as important as these three branches are, and trying to keep them within their boundaries as to what they were actually formed for and what their duties are. I was very disturbed by recent articles pertaining to some judges that were basically facing congressional questions, where we had a judge who was looking to be elected, who was asked by, I think it was Senator Kennedy, who asked her if she knew what Article 5 was. She said she didn't. He asked her what Article 2 was. She said she didn't. How is that even possible in modern day? I mean, did this lady not graduate somewhere? Did she not take any type of judicial training? I just don't understand that, and how that wouldn't be just thrown out right away. I would think that would disqualify somebody.
You would think, but does tend to be a movement among certain groups where they don't want to obey and honor the Constitution anymore. So the best way to do that is to get people in those positions who aren't going to obey and honor the Constitution. And so ignorance is a good way to do that too. It's really
does anyone know did she get appointed? Did she?
I haven't followed up on that, but that's a good question. I don't know if anybody knows or not, but that's quite disturbing when you look at people that are being put into position, especially of law and in our three branches that don't even know what the Constitution or what the law says. It's pretty disturbing to see that happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of playing in the other guy's sandbox, because Roe v. Wade was a great example of that. There was a statute written into the Constitution, but the judicial branch wrote it, not the legislative branch. They wrote the statute. It looks just like a statute. Now, they'll never say they did, but they did. And then you have other branches of government. For example, if you look at the powers of Congress, one is to declare war. The last time Congress actually declared war, I think it was before World War II. So in the meantime, the executive branch, the president, has been declaring war, because nobody wants, if it turns out bad, nobody really wants the rap for it. So there's just, and so everybody's playing in the other person's sandbox. And then you've got, the executive branch doing all the executive orders. That's really for the lawmakers. It's very interesting. So they're all coloring outside the lines right now.
A lot of crossover going on, and we do have a comment that asked the question I'm sure a lot of people are asking, and that is what recourse do we the people have if a judge does not uphold the Constitution, or some of these other boundaries are crossed over by the other branches? What recourse do we the people have other than what we're trying to do here at Convention of States? But that obviously is not something that is part of what we're doing, unless you can consider that overreach. And I don't know whether you'd consider that. I mean, a judge that doesn't know the Constitution that's not really overreach. That's just, like you say, ignorance.
Well, I know that the judicial system has a kind of a principle in there that if a judge is not, that's a great question, because a lot of judges are appointed. So it's supposed to be that if a judge is not in good standing, or if it's doing things outside the Constitution, that they're supposed to be able to be impeached or taken out of their position. But I don't hear that happening very often. It's like, I'm not sure there's accountability in that area.
Now, does that impeachment happen in that specific district, or is that something that crosses state lines?
Well, I would think that, most of the judges are either in their state or they're in their district. And I would think it would stay inside of there, because most of everything they're going to do in there. But I don't know all the details of how they do that. I just know that there's a provision that talks about others are supposed to be evaluating how they're doing against the Constitution. And if you see a judge that you can tell they're not following the Constitution and they're not judging the right way according to those documents, then they should be pulled aside, and there should be something that can be done.
Yeah. Well, we have a few more comments here. I know Dale's getting ready to look at the clock here, but I want to go up and throw a few more comments. This is
over time here, but go ahead.
This is spurred on some comments, so I just wanted to bring a few more of these up here. Gary Harbaugh says that law schools do not so much teach the Constitution as they teach about all the cases that expanded federal powers.
That is such a great point, because that's what's happening. We're teaching all these lawyers are going through law school, and they're all talking about these precedent cases, but not the original Constitution or some of the things that have been added to the Constitution by law. And so what you got then is you got a bunch of lawyers out there and judges who are now not using the Constitution like it was used before. So there's a living view of the Constitution and there's an original intent. And so that is a huge problem all over the country. They've been indoctrinating these lawyers.
That's a good question from Gary. He is an attorney, by the way.
Well,
So
he would know all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. We have one more question I think that you should be able to answer for us now, Debbie, because it's on a lot of people's minds. And that is, maybe Debbie could define treason for us.
Ooh.
Susan's on top of it tonight, let me tell you.
I know. I have that here. Actually, let me see if I can just really quick find it here.
Give her a minute there.
It's summed up as giving aid and comfort to enemies.
Aid and comfort.
Say it again.
Giving aid and comfort to enemies. That's kind of like an overall short thing. I don't know I could look it up in the Constitution exactly what it says, because it does define it in there. But giving aid or comfort to enemies. And
so would you consider giving aid what Kamala Harris did to those people that were Antifa protesters who she was raising money for to get him out of jail? Would that be aid?
Now, Ken, now you're just
thinking.
Just
thinking.
Yeah, I think that the bar for treason has fallen away, and we need somebody to bring the bar back out, because there's a lot of stuff going on that's aiding some of our enemies right now. I think most of us can see it.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, but nobody seems to be being held accountable, and I'm not sure what we do about that.
Well, and too many people aren't being upset about it either. It just doesn't. It seems to roll off people's backs.
Right.
All right. We got to wrap it up, Debbie. You've taken us. You've gone way over time here. I'll tell you.
Sorry.
But it's been great as usual. It's been great. So a lot of good comments, and some of those people I might mention. I wanted to mention a couple of them. David Nally and John Graves. These are new district captains, and we're going to be having them on as a guest here in later on in April and in May. I don't know which. We've got them already scheduled, but I can't remember which one's which. But so glad to see them on tonight. So good number of comments tonight. Very good. Well, Debbie, I think. Do you need to wrap it up here, or any closing words?
I would just say pay attention and hold those people accountable who run for office and get in these positions to do what the Constitution says they're supposed to do. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Debbie, once again, thank you very much. And folks, we have her coming back in May, on May 15th, for another good edition. Don't know right now if it'll be Constitution or civics, whatever is interesting to us at the time. So, all right. Thanks, all right. Debbie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Debbie.
Always good, Ken. I tell you, always good to have Debbie on. Well, Ken, we're gonna skip a couple things here, and let's go right on to Raise Your Voice. Okay.
Okie doke. We can do that.
A segment that features you. Scan the code and join the fun. It's your turn to be heard.
Well, as Marango once again reminds us, it's that time of the night to go ahead and get your smartphones out and get your QR codes in line and get ready to jump on. And as we said tonight, we've got a Slido presentation that I think we'll kind of go back and draw on what Debbie was talking about tonight. So we're going to go ahead and bring up that screen and allow everybody to get ready to answer some questions. And we should be bringing that up about now for you to see. So there you go. You've got the QR code for your smartphone and the Slido.com for your tablets or your desktops, and the number 9380405 will get you in. We'll give you a couple of seconds there to get that lined up before we start our 3 questions tonight. They are all multi questions, so we have no quiz, so to speak, but we do have some questions for you. So, well, we have an anonymous question. Oh, we have David with a question saying, would treason be what is happening with our borders that are being overrun? That's an interesting question, because I think that falls into the aiding portion of treason. Don't you think it, Dale? We are aiding
certainly
people.
do. I certainly do think that it applies. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So good question, David. And I think you're spot on. I think we could probably have another whole show on things that qualify for treason in our country right about now.
That would be a good show. And maybe yeah. Okay. Keep that in mind, Ken. That's good.
Put your pencil to that one, Dale.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get started with our first question tonight. That is, when was the Constitution signed? 1776, 1785, 1787, or 1788?
See, I took notes during Debbie's presentation. So
did you? Well, you can't answer. You can't answer.
I know the answer. I know the answer. So.
You do. Okay. Well, there's a 67% jumped on 1787. We got some 1776ers and a couple of 1785ers. Dale, we have some variants here. So,
oh boy.
Does Debbie hand out gold stars?
No, she wouldn't do that.
No, she doesn't send them like donuts or something for the winter.
No.
Okay.
Can't get her to do that.
Can't get her to do that. Well, the correct answer is 1787.
Yep.
And that brings us to our second question. Which state had the most signers? Was it New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, or Massachusetts? Boy, I think they paid attention to that one, Dale.
They must have. They must
so
have.
So far, it looks like they just jumped right into 100% Pennsylvania.
No hesitation there at all, huh?
No, everybody jumped on that one. No.
Yeah.
Nope. And I should have put Rhode Island in there. That would have been a little clunker, but all right. You got 100 in that class. You didn't do so well on the first one. Let's see how you do on the last one. And that is, how many articles are there in the Constitution? See, this should be easy on the pop quiz we're throwing tonight. This should be a fairly easy one.
This ought to be easy. This ought to be easy.
7, 5, 9, or 12. Right now we're at 100% 7. So it looks like it's pretty much staying. I think people paid attention to those last two questions. We only got them on the first one there, Dale. So.
Yeah. Got to make them tougher. Ken.
Well, we figured we'd get it started tonight anyway and see what happens. So it'll get heavier next week, I think.
All right.
We'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, listen, we got through the Slido portion a little faster than I thought we would. Let me go ahead. I've got a John's Journal lined up for us tonight, so let me go ahead and run that. This is one that actually John did a couple years ago, but I thought it kind of pertained, especially to Debbie's presentation tonight, and I thought it kind of had a related to what we were talking about tonight. So let me bring up John Ackerman for John's Journal here real quick.
John Ackerman again for Convention of States, Indiana. One of the favorite presidents of my life is Ronald Reagan, and he spoke these words, quote, "The federal government has taken too much money from the people, too much authority from the states, and too much liberty from the Constitution." Close quote. President Ronald Reagan. That is why Convention of States exists, because the federal government has exceeded its boundaries. It has taken too much from the people, from the states, and from the Constitution. It's time to rein in runaway bureaucracy and lifetime career politicians and return to the rule that was meant to be we the people. And so help us. Join Convention of States. Sign the petition. Volunteer to help. Be a patriot. Help us return to the grassroots, the way things ought to be.
Yeah, spot on as usual, and you can tell that was a little older one. John's background changed a little bit there. It's one of the early editions, but some wise statements, and obviously Ronald Reagan had it right. way back then, he had it right. So, yes, and Dale, I'm going to unmute you because you're muted. I think there
Sorry
you
about
go.
that.
There you
I
go.
think that was from March of 2021 that John did that one.
2021. Okay.
So
Yep.
a couple years ago. We have so many of those John's journals. I think we'll and John keeps creating new ones for us. But I think from time to time we'll dip into the library, John's
The
journal
archives,
library,
yeah.
the archives, and pull out one that seems to be appropriate. So, okay. Well, Ken, let's wrap it up here this evening. Just a quick reminder, the next COS Indiana Live Roundtable, where we have a panel discussion, is coming up on April 24th, fourth Monday of every month. And Ken, I think I mentioned this to you. We're going to try and, the panel has historically been consisted of the executive group here in Convention of States in Indiana. And we're going to start factoring in some new faces into that group. So get more people involved that are in leadership positions in Convention of States here in Indiana. So I think that's a good thing. And I think we'll get more people involved.
Sounds like a good plan. I agree.
We're gonna start that. We're gonna kick that off starting on our roundtable on April 24th.
Good.
Okay.
Good to hear. Yep.
Also want to mention that any of our viewers tonight that have a comment that they weren't able to get on or a question, they can those can be submitted to us via email at our email address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. So Ken and I check those emails every day. And so if you have a comment or a question that you weren't able to get it on tonight or to us, feel free to send it via email.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll mention one more time our national website, conventionofstates.com. And if you would like to join us here in Indiana, join Convention of States, go to that national website, conventionofstates.com, and sign up and become a supporter here in Indiana. So love to have you. Love to have you. Also want to mention and remind everyone about our podcasts that are available. The audio portion of our roundtable broadcast, as well as the COS Indiana Live Voices. Both of these podcasts can be found on Spotify.com. So if you're a person that enjoys listening to a podcast while you're doing other activities, then check us out. And hope you would enjoy these podcasts that we have available. So Ken, I think that's a wrap. Unless you got any other comments or questions that we have.
I do have one other plug I want to make, Dale. It concerns our newsletter, and I want to go ahead and throw out an update and a plug. We had some difficulties getting that out towards the end of March. Too much to go into at this point, just to know that it slowed us up in getting the newsletter out. But I have good news, and that is that it's in the queue. We're waiting for National at this point to review it and approve it. And I'm hoping it'll be out, if not tonight, by tomorrow, so that you can expect the newsletter, which I've kind of titled March/April. So it's kind of gonna cover the end and the beginning of April, and we're still going to try and get an April one out in full. But just so people know, we have a newsletter coming out. You can expect a fresh copy in your email if you're on our list, hopefully by tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I know that you and Susan Lyon is our editor, and I know you and Susan have been working very hard on this. You had some technical changes that you had to work your way through. Do you think we got them do we have them in place as far as going forward?
I think right now it's in place. Yeah, we have, just some things that Susan and I need to keep abreast of, with some changes that happen on the national side with our citizens builder. That that obviously changes a little bit, so we have to be up on that. But other than that, yeah, I think it's going to work, and we should be okay.
All right. Okay. Well, I think that should be a wrap tonight. I see Debbie is still in the waiting room. Let's say good night to her. Let's bring her on. Have a good night, Debbie.
Good night,
Thank
Debbie.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
All right, Ken. That's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dale. Good night.
Everyone, have a good evening. We'll see you back here again next Monday at 7 p.m. And we have as a guest that evening, one of our volunteers, John Holmes. And John happens to be a constitutional coach. And I think this should be very interesting. We're kind of on a Constitution theme here in the month of April so far. But John, I think it'll be a very interesting. This is another way of a person in Convention of States expressing their activism, and so I hope everyone will enjoy meeting John and learning about what he's doing and what he can do for you. So, looking forward to that. All right. Ken, have a good evening. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Yep.